What's up, everybody? Welcome to It Just Means More Football and Coffee. I'm Rob Williams, along with my partner, Craig McMichael here, and we're excited about all of this is going to bring you. Craig, what you sipping on this morning?
I've got a little dark roast coffee, but I've got it in my Square bookstore, the official bookstore of Oxford, Mississippi.
Oh,
Coffee.
very nice.
What
Very
about you?
nice. I'm working on the Dad Fuel mug today. It's Friday today as we're recording. It's my day off, and so that means a lot of dad duty, a lot of house duty. But it's good to get on here and talk about football, where college football never stops, and our mugs are bottomless. It just means more football and coffee. Look, we want to welcome you guys in. I know this is the first episode, and so we're not really sure who all is going to be listening to this. But as we are sitting here relaxed, just some guys talking about football, sipping our coffee, we recognize the gap, at least for me, on a Saturday morning, Craig. I want to wake up, I want to make some breakfast items, whether it's some biscuits, some sausage, a little breakfast pizza, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I want a cup of coffee, and I want to sit down and I want to take in my college football content, and that never stops all
Nope.
throughout the year. So
Nope.
for me, it's just something where I need that at 7 a.m. and it's not coming from any other platform. So we're here to fill that gap.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see it on the way in the season, whether you're heading to the tailgate or just getting ready to figure out what's going on. To me, like that's the key. We're both dads. We both got little ones. So we're making that breakfast and we don't have a lot of time. So, 30, 40 minutes, get you all you need to know what's going on, the latest in college football. We'll talk a little SEC. We'll also look at, some of the major headlines going on. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited. And so for everybody else along the way, we just invite you to join along on the ride. It's going to be pretty informal. It's gonna be laid back because we're welcoming you into the living room as well. So grab your cup of coffee, sit down, take a sip, and engage with us. We would love to hear from you as we talk about some of these topics. We'll get to that just a little bit later. As we get going this morning, I just want to kind of open up. Craig, talk about the origin of the show from your perspective, and how this kind of came about for us to get going with It Just Means More Football and Coffee.
Sure. So I think we're both very fortunate. We both write for the last word in college football. I cover the University of Georgia. They're not bad. And then you also cover the University of South Carolina. So even though we may be rivals in the formerly SEC East, may it forever, may it forever live in our hearts. We've definitely become good buddies. I think that we've done a really nice job of not only capturing what's going on at Georgia and South Carolina, but I think we have a really good beat of what's going on in the SEC and college football. So to me, it made sense for us to come together and really have this idea. I think we share a lot in common. Obviously our passion for college football, both being dads, but more importantly, also sharing our opinions. So I think you can check us out. We both write about 1 or 2 articles a week on the last word. I know we're both ripping through some NFL draft coverage. I looked at Brock Bowers last week. We'll have Lad McConkey coming out this week. Who'd you spotlight? Who'd you look at?
Well, I'm actually out of my area a little bit, and I have Caleb Williams and Bo Nix both coming out this week, and so that'll be it's been cool to be able to dive into some of those top quarterbacks in the market. I will say, quick plug for the Gamecocks though, I've been watching Senior Bowl practice, a lot of buzz around Rattler and Leggett, making some noise over there, and so I'm looking for them to maybe be some risers in this draft process. But we can get to draft talk as we get closer to April.
100%. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the Senior Bowl. It's kind of like dating, right? It's like you don't got to impress them all. You just got to find one, right? And I think that's going to be the key. So I know Rattler's done a great job. McConkey's also, I think, finally healthy this year. He's making some moves. So I see both those guys going up maybe from that middle round up to the second. Maybe that first round if they find that right match.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely loaded receiver class this year. I got a chance to do a national piece spotlighting the top 5 receivers, in my opinion, that are heading into the draft this year for last word. And so you can check that out as well and kind of see where I rank those top 5 guys. And, there's some variation in there. But the top 1 or 2, I think, are pretty consensus across the country. No spoiler there that Marvin Harrison Jr. is at the top spot for me. But after that,
Maserati Marv, isn't it?
yeah, Maserati Marv. That's the
I
guy.
think that's his official name. I don't know. It's what I keep hearing from Gus Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy growing up and watching his dad.
Yeah.
I was a big Patriots fan growing up, so never a big Colts guy, and he was always on the opposing side. But watching Marvin Harrison Jr., the route running is the same, but the size and athleticism is just crazy. So I think that NFL, that's why NFL scouts are just salivating, because they can see he's pretty polished all the way through. And you have to imagine he's been doing this his whole life. He's been watching his dad. He's been training. He's been understanding how to play the position. So it's exciting to see what he'll do. But after you get past number one, there's definitely some room for variation in there. Maybe some South Carolina guys, maybe some Georgia guys, McConkey making his way up the list. And so we'll see where he lands when the draft order actually comes through.
Yeah. To me, if you're going to look at it, it's going to be Brock Bowers. I mean, he's I called it in that draft preview. He's a unicorn. You know, we were talking earlier this week. You know, is that Rob Gronkowski? Sort of. Like, I don't know. Bowers is just special. Like, other teams knew he was the guy. Yet whether he was attached, he had his hand in the ground, or he was out in space, he would just find that open space and he would just exploit it. And he showed up in the biggest games. So to me, you know, he had that high ankle sprain, had the tightrope surgery 26 days later. He is out there playing again. I mean, he is a true warrior. So to me, like out of that receiving class, it's gonna be Brock Bowers. He's a consensus top 10 pick, and we'll see what happens.
And that's the question. Health will be the question for me long term with Bowers, just the body type. You know, I agree with you. I think talent wise, absolutely a unicorn. Long term, you look at somebody like Gronk, had a lot of trouble staying healthy just because you're such a big athletic guy. And so there's a lot of hard falls. There's a lot of big collisions. You're going to have guys gunning for you in the NFL. And so with Bowers coming back from an injury so quickly this year, it speaks to how his body's going to respond to some of that. But I'll be interested to see if those start to pile up on him. Do you get a Zion Williamson to make a segue over to the NBA comparison there? Do you get that type of situation? That one's pretty extreme, so I'm not predicting that for Bowers. But just the body type, sometimes injuries can come into play. The cool thing about Bowers, though, for me, is that he seems to really have a receiver type of build, but he's just thicker. And so the athleticism is there, where he doesn't seem to be as lumbering as maybe a Gronk and some of those injuries. He's a little more graceful, I'll put it that way. So we'll see if he can avoid the injuries a little more.
Well, I think it's like, you know, he's like he's from Napa, so he's kind of like a fine wine. He's just going to keep getting better with age. But like one of the things I think is really going to set him apart is they can put him out on the edge. He doesn't have to be, you know, he doesn't have to be in that H-back spot. He doesn't have to be in the spot, so, you know, getting crushed. They can put him out in different spaces to kind of take advantage of that size, take advantage of that speed, take advantage of that athleticism, and maybe limit some of that contact. Because I'm right there with you. These guys, their shelf lives are so short and so small. But, you know, to me, Gronk is going to be next year when you're getting ready for that fantasy pick. You know, Brock is going to be right there with a number, you know, up top there.
Yep, I'm looking forward to that. It'll be cool to pull them off the board instead of Kelsey and Taylor Swift's sideshow. Anyway, as we get into our main course today, look, we're gonna focus on the SEC, especially today, because that's what we cover. And so I think that, like Craig said it well, that we both have a pretty well-rounded perspective on the national scene, but covering teams in the SEC and having ties to the SEC means that that's home for us. And so it feels a little more appropriate for us to really take a dive into that. And we can't get started talking about 2024 in the SEC without looking back and talking about what happened at the end of the season, and especially losing Nick Saban as a coach on the sideline in this league. You got to speculate that he's still going to be around the game in 1, 2, maybe 3 different capacities. But what is the impact really as we look at Saban stepping away? What's the impact on the rest of the league? First of all, you have to look at what he's done. You know, 7 national championships, 11 SEC championships. He's the GOAT, and it's really not arguable. I know that it's difficult to sit there from a Georgia perspective and recognize that. And maybe the Georgia listeners don't want to hear that right off the bat on episode 1. So I'll be the one to say it from one of the teams in the SEC that he had the worst winning percentage against, South Carolina. I'll take that, and I'll recognize him as the GOAT.
Hey, game respects game there. I get it. You know, like one of the things, you look at what made 2021 so sweet. Not only did Georgia break that 41-year curse, right, of not winning a national championship, but they were able to beat Saban. And, Saban was that one thing that was Georgia's kryptonite. I mean, Kirby, for all the great things that he does, he has brought the process from Tuscaloosa to Athens better than any other, better than any other assistant, save to what's going on with Sark down in Austin. But Saban had just had something special, and you look no further than what happened in December in Atlanta. Georgia's rolling in with a 29-game winning streak. They're back-to-back national champions, and they laid an egg. You know what? I've talked to a lot of Georgia fans, and they're not happy with me. You needed to win that game. The margin for error was not there this year.
Yeah.
And they played a little bit tight. Bobo did a great job all year, airing it out, making sure they were attacking. They did it the first drive against Alabama. They marched right down the field, and then all of a sudden, everything tightened up. Now, you can look at Bowers' injury, you can look at McConkey's injury for that, but Georgia had enough weapons in order to attack, and more importantly, the Georgia defense didn't show up. Jade Milroe, all the angst against him and all the problems against him, made those key conversions. But when you look at what college football is losing, you know what they're losing. Darth Vader. They're losing that one key focus that everyone is paying attention to. Kirby Smart is not that focal point. He's not putting himself out there. He's not on the Aflac commercials. He is not the villain that Saban was. Saban was a villain to many fan bases, but if you were a coach or you had a passion for college football, the process was so important. We were talking a little bit about the Senior Bowl. Phil Savage wrote a great book the other day. It was or a couple years ago. It was about 4th and goal every day, about Nick Saban and his impact of how he sets up his program and how program alignment. And that is where you are going to lose it in college football. 14 college football coaches, 1 NFL coach is currently on Nick Saban's coaching tree, not to mention all the different assistants of what's going on. He took that wayward school of coaches, bringing in, reinventing what the analyst was, but he was able to identify talent, reform that talent, and then other schools are going to want to do that. Who is going to take that place? I don't know if it's Kirby. He's done it a little bit, but he's kind of keeping it pretty close to Georgia. But you know what? We've got a definite vacuum here of what college football losing.
Do you think, just looking at the landscape of acting coaches now, do you think Kirby is the clear-cut top coach in the game right now? Or do you have arguments? I think when we make this argument, you have to look at coaches that, have national championships, first of all. I think that's a qualifying factor.
Yep.
And then you're going to look at, multiple national championship winning coaches that are out there. I think Kirby being the most recent to reach that level outside of Saban kind of puts him in that category. I think the way that Georgia is built, and because, like you said, he took a lot of things from Tuscaloosa and brought them to Athens, I think it creates that narrative a little bit. But if I'm from the outside looking in, which I can be a little bit here, I would put Saban there. Obviously, the list of other coaches that have won multiple national championships also includes Dabo Swinney, and that's a whole nother discussion about the trajectory of that program. And my bias may show just a little bit. I'll do my best to take my garnet glasses off. I would still put Kirby at the top of that list just because of the construction of the program, the level of recruiting, and ultimately right now staying modern and staying up with where the game is going. I think that when you look at other coaches in that way, Dabo specifically, the lack of utilizing the portal, or now they're starting to dabble in a little bit, right? Just not having brought anybody in to this point is going to put them behind from a depth standpoint. And so I'm just looking at Kirby all around, because coaching is no longer just X's and O's. It's no longer even just personalities and managing people. It's so much more of a business now than it used to be. And you can't just go sit in mama's living room and talk to her and make her feel comfortable about sending her baby down to your school to be with you for 3 to 4 years. It's bigger than that. And so you really have to be able to run it at an upper level. I think, Saban at his age looks at that, doesn't necessarily like it. I don't know that anybody really likes the state of the game where we are right now, just not that we're against players getting paid, not that we're against the portal, but that there needs to be some regulations on it some way or another. My opinion is just that it's so wide open. That played a factor in Saban's retirement as well, whether he readily admits it or not. I heard Shane Beamer on an interview in the days following Saban's retirement mention that he was in the meeting, the SEC coaches meeting, just hours before he announced to his team.
He had an interview with a coach just before he announced his retirement.
Yeah, so
I saw that on Football Scoop. So he was in that meeting with the SEC coaches, and then he was interviewing a coach for his staff for 2024 just before he retires.
The story was that up until like 5 to 10 minutes before he walks into the meeting, he has two directions. And so he's either going in to say, all right, guys, let's regroup. This is where we're headed in 2024. Or he's saying, I'm out. He calls Miss Terry and he says, this is kind of where I'm sitting. And she says, whichever way you go, I'll support you. And then he walks in. And so it really feels a lot like, every source that I've heard, every reputable name that I've heard have the discussion has said, I really think it was a last minute deal. And, people think that the AD at Alabama knew for days and that they were already starting the search. And that sounds good. And that makes for a good, it makes for a good article. It makes for a good headline. But I really think it was last minute. And I think that they found out when he knew, which was about the time he walked into that team room.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the conversation was there. Greg Byrne does a great job at Alabama, and Greg Byrne is worth his salt because he's got a list of names. He knows he's talking with Nick. He knows exactly what's going on. I'm sorry, Coach Saban. I know he yelled at somebody for calling him Nick. But Greg Byrne's got that list. He's got that Rolodex, knowing when Coach Saban retires, he's going to go out there. But I think, regardless of what happens, you raise an interesting point. We have two coaches in college football right now that have won a national championship at the Division I level: Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is going to benefit. He's shown it. Recruiting, NIL, transfer portal. You know what? Georgia doesn't talk about NIL, but if you're not talking about NIL, that means it's working and it's doing well. The collective does a good job there. You know it because guys stick around, and there's a transfer portal where they're able to take ETN from Florida. They're able to take the guy from Vandy, number one guys or top rated guys, bringing in on them. They're able to reinforce their roster. But I think the question you bring up, who's that top 5 list? Last summer I had to do the top 5 list in each of the conferences of the coaches. And it was great, for the SEC, it was Saban 1, Kirby 2, Brian Kelly 3. But you look at overall college football, Harbaugh is gone. Whether that's cheating or not, he did a great job with that program, resurrecting, right, only realizing the potential of that program. But Saban is gone now too. Dabo won some championships, but unlike Saban, has not shown the ability to adapt using the portal.
Yep.
You know what? Also, here's the big part with Dabo. Bringing in new staff. Last year he brought in Garrett Riley, but that offense looks exactly the same. You're going to bring in Garrett Riley, you better bring in the air raid. You better bring in what he did at TCU to evolve and adapt that offense. And that did not happen. So is Dabo going to be able to adapt, or is he going to be stuck in 2017? Because if he's going to stuck like that, then the door is going to be wide open for a lot of other folks.
Yeah, the landscape of the entire college football, the shape of everything has changed. And so, it's not the same game, like you said. Going back to your comment about the list, right? Who are the top coaches? Where does Kalen DeBoer fit on this list? Because now he's been hired at Alabama. How do we evaluate this hire? I think just from a pure winner standpoint, I think he should have been the number one guy. I think that Lanning was number one on a lot of people's lists. And you could shoot for the stars in a lot of different directions. But if we just look purely at winning, I think that DeBoer has done it. And I don't think you can discount. I heard this take, and I'll give credit to Mike Morgan of the SC Network, who I heard say this. But at Sioux Falls, where DeBoer won multiple national championships, you're looking at a situation where you don't have an advantage over your competitors. You're at the NAI level. It's not like, hey, I've got more NIL dollars than you, or my facilities are this much better than yours. You're pretty much level playing field, which means same level of talent, same level of facilities, same level of money. It comes down to coaching. Who can out scheme who's going to be the better coach? And so if you can win for a long time, multiple national championships at that level, and then the schools that he's been at prior to Alabama, and Washington has some history, but what he did at somewhere like Indiana as the OC, and just his history, these are not schools where we've seen a ton of winning, right? It's not schools where we've seen things go really well. And then to take Washington to the heights that he took them to this year, especially coming from where they were coming from, in a pretty quick turnaround just in 2 years, it's incredible to see how he's been able to win. So just from a pure, I need a ball coach. I said the same thing about the A&M hire after Jimbo was gone. The oil money in Texas, they just want to go get the biggest name. They need somebody who can coach ball. I think they did that with Elko. I think the same can be said here about Alabama. You go get a guy who has proven to win games. And so we can look at it and say, is he ready for the environment? Time will tell. Is the schedule going to smack him in the face? Did he have some losses in the portal? Yeah. And they're going to melt down when it doesn't go well in year one. And by doesn't go well, I mean like 9-3 or 10-2. But
or Feinbaum. He'll get some raise. Maybe they can come over.
Yeah, it's going to be nuts. It's going to be nuts. But I do like the hire. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So my thought on DeBoer, he is a phenomenal coach. He has won everywhere he has been at and has shown to have that Midas touch. That Midas touch, though, includes Ryan Grubbs. Is it Grubbs or Gruggs? I think his offensive coordinator. Yeah, he's been with them since since the NAIA days. Rumor is that he's going up to Seattle now to be offensive coordinator.
Right.
Defensive coordinator was also with DeBoer for a long time. There was some continuity there, and being a longtime coach, there is something in staff continuity. He's making some changes. I love the fact he's bringing in Kane Womack from South Alabama. I think that makes a lot of sense. He's a hell of a coach. Did a great job down there. Is Alabama going to be patient? What are they looking for? 2024 is going to be different. We have the portal. We have recruiting. We have a 12-team playoff. You know what? Alabama fans are losing their minds because Caleb Downs all of a sudden is entering the transfer portal. Now he went and got paid, he went to Ohio State because of their ability to do really well. But I think the biggest thing with DeBoer is he's going to be able to silence that noise. He's going to be able to focus. Listen to a great interview on the Audible a couple weeks ago with Chris Peterson, former head coach at Boise State and Washington. He just talked about how DeBoer is laser focused, but he's able to connect with folks. And if Alabama gives them a chance, yeah, sure, they might go 9-3 next year. But that's still probably a playoff spot. And then you probably can go and make a run. And look at the offense that they have. They're able to scheme and put themselves in advantage. He's not going to have better players. Where I see, so I think DeBoer is going to be a great hire. It's going to look different than what Saban did. I don't think we're going to have the number one recruiting classes like they did. And that doesn't happen. I think your number one recruiting classes are going to be from Austin, and they're going to be in Athens with Texas and Georgia. You know what? And Alabama's going to find out what the Nick Saban effect was. It's no longer Bear Bryant in there. It is going to be different. It is going to be more of a dogfight. They're still going to be in the upper echelon of the SEC, but there's going to be more fluidity. Go ask your friends at LSU what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, and you mentioned number one classes in Georgia. As we look at the rest of the SEC, how does this stack up? First of all, take a minute to look back at Georgia, because I know this is your school and that's who you cover. And so you've taken some time this year to talk about 29 straight. Yep. Let's just recognize the greatness of what that is, and that we probably don't see that get touched for quite some time.
Yep.
And then looking ahead in 2024, is that the team to beat? For me, if we're looking at the SEC specifically, I think it has to start in Athens. That's my opinion. I'm not gonna pull away from that. There are other contenders. You look at Baton Rouge, you look at Oxford, right? You look at you look at Sark in Austin, and you look around the league, and there's some other teams that are rising that made a lot of noise this year. We'll see how they transition into this new look SEC, but I think it still runs through Athens and what Kirby's doing.
It definitely does. And my biggest thing is, what does what does Schumann do with the defense? He got T Rob coming in from Alabama. He's going to take over from Muschamp, who's going back to an analyst. If there was a kryptonite for 2024 with Georgia, the one thing I looked at, it didn't look right from a defensive perspective. Early on in the season, they were getting run over a little bit. Look at the Mizzou game. Schrader did a phenomenal job, hitting the edge, and it didn't seem like no matter what that Georgia could build that wall that they traditionally did. Yes, on paper, Georgia is going to be the favorite in 24. But my biggest thing, what is that defense going to do? And if I'm going to say one disappointment or one critique, is that the portal has focused on the offense. Is there anybody in the defensive line setting that edge at outside linebacker that is going to help? Georgia was young. They had a couple young freshmen, being able to put it together. They brought in an impressive class. And yes, they're the Kings. But I don't know. It's only going to take one bad day, like what happened in December this year, for them to knock it off. And to me, I'm looking at either Sark at Texas, or I'm really curious about Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, because there were some interesting points there, and we can go there. We can go there now, or I can get your reaction there.
Yeah, I think again, I do think it goes through. I think it goes through Athens. The difference for me and what you just said is that one bad day might not be enough to knock them off this year. With a 12-team playoff,
Yep.
You can easily get SEC teams in at 10-2. Not that I think Georgia's going to lose 2 regular season games this year. I don't necessarily see that. One, sure. I think that the way that the SEC is shaping up, it may be a case where nobody has an undefeated season. We're going to get one of those years where there's a little bit of cannibalism within the league, right? Where people are knocking each other off because the parity is happening to a degree, and especially with Saban leaving, calling back to that whole point. What happens to Bama? I don't feel like it's a clear cut 1 and 2 with them and Georgia anymore. I think Georgia is probably just ahead of everyone else. But that second level is really, really strong. You're not head and shoulders above the rest of the pack anymore.
Yep.
And so, like you said, you got Lane Kiffin, you got Sark. And then, of course, you have Brian Kelly in Baton Rouge. And so if we look at that, those risers on that next level,
Yep.
I know how you feel about Lane Kiffin. I would make the argument for Brian Kelly and LSU simply because I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be able to keep the offense rolling to the level that it has been. You look at him in the bowl game, and we can say what we want about bowl games, right? Some of them, I still, the whole bowl games don't matter. This is an aside. To me, is kind of a load because they still get the best ratings. Even if their ratings slip, they still outrank everything else on TV at the time.
Sure.
And so they're still going to happen. We're still going to continue to pump money into them because they're revenue events. And so the problem is kind of these mid-level games, like you had LSU and Wisconsin in the ReliaQuest Bowl this year. The lower level bowls, those guys aren't opting out. They're not looking to hit the portal necessarily from those lower level schools. The top bowls, where especially now that those top 12 teams are going to be in the playoff, you're probably not going to see a ton of opt-outs there because they're still competing for something. And so it's kind of this middle level, right? Like the ReliaQuest, this is the one that used to be the Outback Bowl, I believe.
Yeah. I'm gonna call it the Outback Bowl. The Outback Bowl come back. If we're getting the damn Mayo Bowl and the Pop-Tart Bowl, give me back the blooming onion, the dancing blooming onion. But
I prefer the Outback Bowl, but it's that level of game. But regardless, Nussmeier is 31 for 45 for 395 and 3 touchdowns and a pick. Granted, he still had some weapons. Brian Thomas Jr. played in the game, and so the flip side of that is that LSU gave up 370 and 3 touchdowns through the air to Tanner Mordecai on the opposite side. So my biggest question about LSU is the defense, but I really think the offense is still going to be high flying, and that's kind of the way that we're shifting. What are your thoughts in Oxford?
Yeah. So real quick on LSU, the only thing I'm concerned about. OC has left. He went back up to Notre Dame. I do like the fact that they went and took Mizzou's defense. Mizzou had probably one of the better defenses in college football last couple of years.
Yeah, Blake Baker, the
I,
whole show of I'm not leaving, I'm staying in Columbia, Missouri, and then
Show me
rip
the
right
money,
out there.
baby. Show me the money.
It's just the power of the big boys. If you're a blue blood and you got the money,
Yeah.
come on down.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what the family looks like in for Brian Kelly this year. But if I'm looking at it, I'm looking at Lane Kiffin and what's going on at Ole Miss. He has dedicated himself to figuring out what he needs to do to build it. The Joey Freshwater that we knew, or the guy who was at Tennessee, that's not the Lane Kiffin we have now. He's still going to troll your ass. He's still going to have a little bit of fun, but at the end of the day, he's figured out what it means to be a football coach. He's learned from Nick Saban. He's got, Pete Golding as DC. Love or hate Pete Golding, that Ole Miss defense looked a hell of a lot better this year. He just brought in former Georgia quarterback Joe Cox as the tight end coach. He's done a great job too at his branding. Come to the SIP, transfer to the SIP. Kiffin knows that at Ole Miss he's not going to have a top 10 recruiting class. But what he knows from his days in the NFL is how to build a roster and how to use free agency or the transfer portal to reinforce.
Yep.
Yes, you know what? Junkins left to go to Ohio State. Kiffin's like, hey, good luck, have fun. You know what? But we're still going to be here. He came out and said when Georgia beat them like 51-14 or 51-17 earlier in the season, he goes, we're not good enough on the defensive line. So he went out. He's got the top D line. He's got the top edge. He's reinforcing the defensive line. Plus, he has Jackson Dart and the receivers. He's got a great running back. To me, Kiffin is the one who's going to seize that opportunity. He did that. But Hemingway is not a fun place to play for opposing teams, especially at night. They are excited, they're loud, and they know how to party. They brought that party in there. Kiffin is also bringing that party. That's why, to me, he's going to take it to that next step, and I'm seeing him and Sark right behind Georgia for 2 and 3.
There's a lot to be said for the number one transfer portal class there.
Yep.
You look at some guys you get. Speaking of LSU, you got Logan Diggs coming over at the running back spot to kind of help bolster that room. From a South Carolina perspective, obviously Juice Wells, I would argue, no offense to London Humphreys coming from Vanderbilt over to Georgia, but I would argue Juice Wells, one of those top guys in the receiver portal class. And so I have seen what he can do from a playmaker standpoint. Excited to see what he does with Jackson Dart. I think he's going to light it up. I think overall, you got talent because you're the number one portal class. But if you look at where he got the talent,
yep,
just like you said, really filling in some holes that needed to be filled. So it's exciting to see what's going to happen in Oxford. Kiffin has the potential to be that next villain as we talk about the vacuum that has been left.
I don't think Greg Burns was ready. I don't think Alabama was ready for Lane Kiffin.
Yep.
To me, Lane Kiffin is perfect for Oxford. A little bit of that underdog, not afraid to poke some people, not afraid to be that pain in the ass. That wouldn't have played at Alabama. That they're a little more regal. Look at the way they dress in the stands. They're all dressed up, look nice. But Kiffin likes that role, and I love the fact that he has stayed at Ole Miss. To me, he is reinvigorating that program. He's doing it in a very interesting way. So yeah, I think he's ready. I really do think that there's some big moves. Again, he's starting to look too. You've got player personnel, you've got coaches kind of coming and going. Seems like Hugh Freeze down at Auburn keeps taking some of his guys or whatever because he can't figure out what he's doing down there. That's another show though. But Lane's done a great job of figuring out, okay, what do I need? How do I tinker? And he's, I think he's got 2 or 3 straight seasons of 10 wins or more. The last time that happened at Ole Miss.
Yep, absolutely. I think the other thing too is that you are king for 10 wins in Oxford, and you're on the hot seat for 10 wins in Tuscaloosa. And so Lane kind of knows what he's doing there. Let's not upset the apple cart. We can still win big here, and I can do it with less pressure. He's got the system worked out. And so I agree with your points there. Hey, it's time for the last word as we wrap up here. Just want to look down the road. What is in store for this show? There's always going to be more football to talk about. there's always going to be another cup of coffee that we need to have, right? Every day we're waking up, we want this content. And so we're giving you this content each and every Saturday morning. We're going to have some guests. We're going to have some team previews. We're going to cover spring ball. I'm excited to see, the different guests that we bring in. For those of you who are listening, or if you're watching, we want to just let you know that we have a network of writers who are covering teams across the SEC and across the nation. And so we look forward to hearing from them and getting some perspectives from them. We can speak, and maybe our biases will come out at times, that maybe a coach or two in the SEC that we're not so fond of, and maybe we can agree on that. But we can bring in somebody from their school and get that perspective, coming from, maybe from a Kentucky perspective or a Missouri perspective or an A&M perspective, and hear directly from them. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully we can get some coaches from former players and those sorts of things on here in the future, as well as we start to, pull the strings that we have to pull. So anything else that you have to tell us as you're listening, we want to hear it. So you can find us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. It's at Rob Williams GCP. That stands for Gamecock Pastor, which was my former burner before my life as a writer. So at Rob Williams GCP. Craig, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, I can be I'm at Twitter. I'm also on Instagram at McMichael7, MCMICHA, and the number 7. And you can always hit us up on email at secfootballandcoffee@gmail.com. We'll also put all this in the link to the show notes at the bottom of the page.
Absolutely. So if you have thoughts, opinions, you disagree with us, you want to hear us talk about something, or if there's a specific guest that you want us to get on, anything from the cafeteria lady in Austin to Lane Kiffin himself, we'll see what we can do to pull it off. So you just let us know who it is that you want to hear from. We'll see if we can get them on the show. And we would love to hear your questions and thoughts as well. Thanks a lot for being here. Craig, any parting thoughts before we get out of here? You finishing up your coffee? I haven't seen your bookstore mug lately. It's got to be still piping hot.
Oh yeah, it's all good. No, like I said, I appreciate you, my friend, and looking forward to doing this once a week. So have a great week, everybody.
Yep, absolutely. For Craig McMichael, I am Rob Williams, and we are It Just Means More, Football and Coffee. We'll see you next week.